for those of you that are on the Zoom right now, we want to introduce you to a new format. Most of you are used to Zooms where there's, you know, a group meeting or something going on. This one is a panel. And so we wanted to keep it to the people involved in that panel, which will be the candidates. And you'll see Carlee Allen and Rusty Lloyd down. They're parts of the nonprofits that are sponsoring tonight. We appreciate that. Nick Allen is with Western Colorado Alliance, who helped put this all together and advertise it. So there's been a lot of work that's gone into this, and we really appreciate you joining us tonight. Nick, you could probably hit the record now. Everybody should be aware that we're going to record this, and we'll share it afterwards with people that want to check that out. Where will that be available? We can post that recording on our Facebook, on Western Colorado Alliance's Facebook site. Yeah. So we're still waiting for Craig. He's coming from the city council meeting, and I think he's going to be here. I just talked to him yesterday, Craig Andrews. And I will say this, that Mark McAllister couldn't make it tonight. He said he had a fundraiser. I did not hear back from Greg Heitz, other than he texted me a few days ago and was pushing back on participating for some reason. And Jody Green, I did never hear back from after numerous messages. So we are doing a second forum that's going to be more economic and infrastructure focused on March 10th. And so we hope we can get all those people involved at that time. So once again, I'll just go over the co-host organizations are Western Colorado Alliance of Mesa County, Community Impact Council, and Rusty, I'll let you talk about them a little bit. Western Colorado Latino Chamber, Clean Tech Business Coalition, Hispanic Affairs Project, which is also referred to as HAP, Citizens for Clean Air, and several more. So with that, how we doing? I think we can get started. Hopefully Craig will be able to get on. He's got my phone number. So the way we want to start and give everybody 2 minutes to introduce themselves. Pretty standard format. After that, we will swing into Q&A. We've got 6 questions that we'll run through. Everybody will get a turn, and we'll try to keep those answers to about 90 seconds. And then at the end of it, there'll be closing remarks. I would remind the audience that you can use the chat feature to send information to the organizers. So Nick and I will be kind of watching that. So with that, we'll start with District A, and Rick Taggert, I'm going to hand it over to you. You can introduce yourself.
Well, thank you, Scott, and thank you to Rusty and other folks, Nick, that are involved in putting this on. We really appreciate it. I am Rick Taggert. I'm presently on City Council and running for another term. A little bit about me. I moved here in the very early 80s to purchase a company called Marmot because my career has been in the outdoor industry, and had the opportunity to grow that company significantly, and broke my heart that as it grew, I needed more money, as a lot of entrepreneurs did, and sold it to a much larger corporation where I went to work. I have strong roots in this valley. I married a woman who's was born and raised in this community. Her name is Deanna, and we have 4 children. And today, I balance my time between trying to give back to the community and at the same time mentoring students as a adjunct professor at the university to give back to students what I gained through my education and then through my corporate career. So I'm very pleased to be here tonight and delighted to answer these questions.
Thanks, Rick. Dennis, please take it away. Dennis is for District D.
Hi, my name's Dennis Simpson. and I've been said I'm running for District D as in dog. I've lived in this city for 25 years or thereabouts, and I worked as a certified public accountant most recently before I retired a little bit at a time, and finally retired about a year and a half ago. I've spent a great deal of time dealing with local government, the city, the county, the school district, and I have brought my background in finance to the table, sometimes not very welcome input, but I've developed a lot of knowledge about how the city deals with its money, how it does budgeting, and how it deals with the public who may have input, and particularly some people like me may occasionally have input that's not in agreement with what the city manager and others in the city are talking about. I think I bring a lot of knowledge and wisdom to the table, a different viewpoint, and I think transparency is the one very, very important thing. I will just end this with telling you right now I'm in the process of trying to open up what's going on at the Las Colonias Business Park, where they formed a corporation, a shell corporation, so they could make leases to people of public land that they won't tell us the terms. And my lawyer and I are in district court right now trying to get that reversed, because the city can't explain why they need this separate little corporation. Thank you.
Thank you, Dennis. Abe, you're up.
Okay. Well, hello, everyone. Thank you to all the organizers for having us here tonight and for putting this on. I'm Abe Herman. I'm running for Grand Junction City Council in District E. I'm a small business owner. We sell products nationally and internationally. And when I'm not working on the business side of things, I spend a lot of my time volunteering with various nonprofits and organizations in the community, working with veterans and kids with disabilities, working with homeless youth, and also serving on the board of a nonprofit where we provide opportunities for underserved youth to get out into the outdoors for their mental health and for their personal growth. I also stay very actively involved with city council meetings, planning decisions, various city initiatives, and really anything else I can do to make our community a better place to live. I'm also an avid mountain biker. I'm a climber, skier, and outdoorsman, and all of that is a big part of why I love our community. I'm running for city council because I want to make sure that we protect all the things we love about our city as we're facing this coming period of unprecedented growth. 2020 was a tough year for all of us, and I want to use the expertise and the abilities that I've developed as a small business owner to help rebuild and grow our economy here at home. That's building and executing budgets, managing staff, making tough decisions that successful leadership requires. I also want to support public safety and public schools to make sure that they have the support they need so that we can make our community the kind of place we want for our businesses and for our families. I'm excited for today's conversation so you all can get to know me a bit better. And I certainly want to hear about your ideas and concerns. So thank you all for taking the time to be here today. And I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Abe. Running for the at-large seat is Randall Reitz. Take it. It's all yours, Randall.
Thank you. Thank you, Rusty, Scott, Nick, and to the local organizations and nonprofits who are hosting tonight. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm Randall Reitz, running for the at-large seat. I would like to introduce myself through telling a personal story. For 2.5 years, I was the CEO of Summit Community Care Clinic. And my first day on the job was the day that the clinic formally separated from the Summit County government. I showed up in jeans and work gloves as we spent the day packing boxes and moving trucks. My own grandfather moved to Mesa County 77 years ago. My father was born in Grand Junction, in the same hospital as my children, in the same hospital system for which I've worked for 20 years. When I was the CEO of Summit Community Care Clinic, it was a time of great anxiety for me. I'd never been a CEO before. I'd never managed a budget, and I dreaded personnel issues. Our 15-person team was a collection of volunteers and paid staff. We only offered medical services. Over the next years, we doubled our medical services, built dental and behavioral services from the ground up, and tripled our staff. Why were we so successful? I think it's 3 reasons. First, because we knew that our community needed us to be the one-stop shop for their healthcare needs. Second, we never let bureaucracy get in between families and the services they needed. And third, because we responded with agility and financial stewardship to changes in the economy. It is this same commitment that we see from local businesses, nonprofits, and churches every day. We collaborate, we meet customer needs, and we respond with agility to changes in the economy. The pandemic has been brutally hard, but through collaboration of these organizations and our hardy citizens, we are weathering the storm. Our families demand the same from our city leaders. We require transparency, agility, and financial leadership. We want leaders who will show up with jeans and work gloves. It's for these reasons that I'm running for city council. I will show up every day, ready to work alongside the great people and organizations of Grand Junction. And I will hold city government accountable to do the same. I look forward to our discussion tonight.
Thanks you. Thank you, Randall. Appreciate that. All right, we're off to our first question. So I will ask the first question, and this is to all of you to answer the same question, of course. What do you want this community to look like in 10 years? 2031, that's hard to imagine. What changes between now and then will make that possible? And Rick, you're up first.
Thank you, Scott. I just got to keep remembering to hit the unmute. I would summarize in three comments. One, I want to see a vibrant community that has an infrastructure, and I mean infrastructure that includes transportation, public safety, recreation, and arts and culture that supports the needs of this community. Secondly, I want to see a very diverse economic base. And third, I want to see an inclusive city that mirrors the inclusivity proclamation that we put in place at City Council a couple of years ago. What changes need to be made then? We're going to need to invest in our infrastructure on an ongoing basis in all of those areas, but doing that very carefully so as to minimize any further tax impacts on our citizens. We've got to diversify. We've got to continue to collaborate with our economic partners to entice businesses to come here, to help expand businesses that are here, and to do whatever we can to encourage startups and entrepreneurs. And the third key area in my mind is we need to continue a very strong partnership with CMU to continue to educate both traditional and non-traditional students that are going to be a critical part of that expanding economy.
Thank you, Rick. Dennis, you're next.
I think Rick did a very good job of explaining a lot of the same thoughts I have. I think that we need a community that doesn't grow to the level of being a Boulder or Fort Collins or that kind of thing. We have to do smart growth. We have to have people involved within the administration and within the council that are willing to look longer term and say, even though these decisions might be difficult now and they may be not popular with everyone when we make them, they're necessary for the long-term benefit of the community. I think we have to be very careful and pay attention to the thoughts that are in the strategic plan, particularly in the land use development area, so that we have a community where people can live comfortably and are not spread out all over the county. I think it's also very important that we, in the next 10 years, or even quicker than that, need to look at some of the things of where we're expending our money and compare it to maybe some of the places that would be better uses. I've heard a lot of talk about we need to do more for the lower economic strata in our community. And I think it's time that we actually sit down when we're talking about money and say, what are our choices? And not talk about one item at a time. And then when we get to some other one, say, we can't afford to do that. I think we need to have a more comprehensive view of where our money goes. And I think we need to be more considerate about our homeless people and the people who are struggling just to get by when they have normal jobs. Thank you.
Thank you, Dennis. Abe, the next 10 years.
Well, my hope is that 10 years from now, it looks a lot the same in a lot of ways. And that's part of why I'm running, and I think that's a theme that we seem to be talking about is we don't want cost of living to go up to where existing residents are getting priced out. We don't want cost of living to be where nurses and teachers and, firefighters and low wage earners are not able to live here. We don't want people getting pushed out of our community. So with this period of growth that we're facing, we need to be really smart about how we're managing that growth and making sure that we are prioritizing affordability and prioritizing that low cost of living. There's a reason that we've chosen to live here, and we want to maintain that sense of community. Now, all that being said, one of the things I love about Grand Junction is the sense of community, the fact that you can walk down Main Street and strangers wave and smile at you. That's a nice quality. There are also certain groups of our community who don't feel privy to that sense of community. And I think it's important that we listen to those feelings and that we identify the pain points and that we think about how we can work on building that greater sense of community for all of our residents.
Thank you, Abe. Randall, the next 10 years.
Yeah, I am Western Colorado to the core. I've been here for 20 years and I love our community. I love Grand Junction. I think we are moving in an excellent direction. Coming out of the last recession, I think we've had a great deal of infrastructure problems have been worked out. I think our traffic problems have started to be figured out. And I think we've become a much more integrated community, a community that takes pride in working together instead of only competing. And so my hope is that we will advance this Colorado vision through collaboration. I think collaboration is at the core of what has brought us this far. We have great organizations like the nonprofits and advocacy groups on the call today who share some shared vision. And when they share vision, they collaborate together to push that forward. And I think that's a great model. I want to have a community that integrates the nonprofits, the for-profit organizations, the small businesses, the churches, and the hardy people who live here, all working toward the same vision. I think some of the details of that vision would be similar to what Rick said. I think we are growing exponentially. I think we need to take that very seriously and give some serious consideration. I think the comprehensive plan put out by City Council and City Management last year gives a pretty good roadmap for that. I think infrastructure needs to include more thoughtful neighborhoods. I would much rather infill to build new neighborhoods and new businesses rather than expanding exponentially and endlessly out toward the suburbs. I would love to have further diversity in our employment and in our jobs. I think we have done a remarkable job so far of becoming the health and human services hub for Western Colorado, for becoming a tourism hub. I love seeing people on our trails who come from other places to share our trails, but we need to be careful about not loving those trails to death, because I think it's kind of the heart of what we are and the heart of what we need to maintain. And then, like I think other people said, we need to make sure that we are an inclusive city, that people of all backgrounds, socioeconomic statuses, they all feel welcome here and they all feel like they have a place at the table with us.
The second question. Oh, there's Devon. Welcome. Second question, what big coming economic, environmental, or public health shocks should we be preparing for? And what can our city do to better prepare? That's a reaction to what's been going on with the weather and the economy and everything else going on. Certainly Grand Junction has gotten through better than most, but Dennis, that goes to you first.
You say me first? Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
The one event I would like to talk about, and it's kind of interesting, I think, in that 2 or 3 years ago, we had a great big deal in the community about the Grand Valley Drainage District wanting to assess a fee on people without an election, that a judge ultimately ruled that that's really a tax, and taxes cannot be increased without an election. Well, the thing that interests me is before that discussion, that election, we were having all kinds of talk about how a 100-year flood was going to come here anytime now, and we were going to have massive amounts of damage done to both in the county and in the city. And since then, there's been just about no discussion about how that could impact us. It's possible that it was all not that big a deal in the first place, that maybe there really isn't that big of a threat. But I believe that it's worth the time now for the city and the county and others in the community to look hard at that potential and discuss it with the public, because if anything is close to what they were saying 2 or 3 years ago, it's going to take a bunch of money, and we're going to have to think about probably a new revenue source. Those are tough decisions to talk about, and it creates a lot of animosity. But I guess I'm prepared to deal with the animosity as long as we have a process that's clear and that both the city council and the public know the risks we're taking. And it obviously, any kind of tax increase would result in an election. But people should be able to decide. And if we get hit with a 100-year flood, at least we can say we tried, we asked the public, and they said, we don't want to pay for it. Thank you.
Thanks, Dennis. Just a reminder, I'm giving everybody 2 minutes for their responses. So Abe, you're next.
So the 3 questions you asked were economic, environmental, and public health.
Yeah, right.
Okay. Yeah, so economically, I think the good news is we're in much better shape than we ever have been. You know, with this real push for economic diversification, we're no longer overly reliant on a single economic source. So that makes our community healthier as a whole. And we certainly want to continue that work. You know, the more different, diverse kinds of businesses and enterprises that we can attract or grow here at home, the better suited we are to weather the storms that happen, at a state or national level. So I think we're in good shape there, and that's really positive news. As far as environmental, somebody mentioned it before, but I think one of the biggest considerations for me right now is what are going to be the impacts of all of this growth and all of these new visitors and new residents on our public lands. Those increased visits have impact, and I think we need to get ahead of the game and make sure that we're planning for those impacts, whether it means expanding trail systems so that it can be more spread out, or just identifying problem areas and being proactive in preventing those kind of impacts. On a little bit larger scale, not specific to Grand Junction, but to the Western Slope as a whole, water scarcity is an issue, and I'm really concerned personally about some of these outside interests that are, buying up land and buying up water rights for speculation. So I think that's something we really are going to need to address in the very near future. Public health wise, we've certainly faced that in the last year, going through this pandemic. I think we need to come out of it and make sure that we're learning lessons. We've been pretty fortunate here with how we've handled it economically. The city keeps plans of how to deal with these emergencies, and I think coming out of this, we need to revisit those plans and learn from the things that didn't go so well and the things that did go well, so that we're better prepared if and when something like this happens again in the future.
Thank you, Abe. Randall, you're next.
Yeah, I think we are going to be facing shocks. I think it's just part of living that we face shocks of different types. My whole career has been in nonprofit healthcare services, both at Marillac Clinic and at St. Mary's Family Medicine Center. And so in these clinics, I worked exclusively with the working low-income people of our community. And in the last year, I've been able to see all 3 of these kinds of shocks and the effects of them. Obviously, the pandemic has been a huge hit to our community, to our state, and to the entire world. And I think we were caught off guard, both locally and nationally. I think locally, we've actually responded pretty well. We have a great public health department that has shown leadership and partnership with city government to do pretty well with that. And so, in that regard of a future pandemic, or if this pandemic lingers longer than we're fearing it might, I think we need to stay the course. For shocks around the economy, we have been a boom and bust economy for a century now. And I think from that, we all know that recession is far worse than growth. And so I think we need to always have our mindset about how can we grow our economy? How can we grow more jobs? How can we help to have homegrown businesses to flourish so that we have a diverse economy that's not going to be taken down by any one sector having a downturn? And then I think for the environment, I think climate change is a major issue for us to look at. It's something that unfortunately we can't handle only at the local level, but we can at least be leaders and role models in declaring that we are facing a climate emergency, that we need to make sure that we are at the front of that and not being dragged from behind. I love skiing. I love Powderhorn Ski Resort, and 3 of the last 5 years have been pretty meager snow. And that was a wake-up call for me. It used to be you would get to snow when you get to Mesa, and then it was halfway to Mesa to Powderhorn. And sometimes this year you didn't get to snow till you got to Powderhorn. And I think that's a major part of our lifestyle. That's why we live here. And Powderhorn is just at that kind of inflection point where a change of even 1 degree would wipe away skiing in our county. And so I think we need to be very, very aware of that.
Thank you, Randall. Rick, your comments, please.
Well, let me start with the economic. I'm not sure I can add a great deal because I think everybody's touched on it. If we are to have a global recession of any magnitude, to a large extent, that's somewhat out of our control. But in terms of helping our own community, not depending on any one single industry is critical. And I don't think we're out of the woods there yet. We're moving toward being out of the woods there yet, but we're not there in total. From an environmental standpoint, I'll go perhaps a little bit, add a couple of things to what other folks said. I am concerned, and I'm glad to hear the clean air folks are here. I'm hoping Kristen Wynn is here because she has been one of the key players there. We adopted an ordinance to help this community by forbidding burning within the city. There were some caveats on that depending on the size of properties, but we need to, that's now been in place pretty close to 3 years. It's time to get back to the table and see how we can strengthen that. Also, you may not be aware, there is an environmental emergency plan that has been developed by the city that is worked on a constant basis. There is a organization structure for emergencies, and it has been done also in concert with the county. Now, God forbid we ever have to use it for either water or fire, but it is in place, and it's built on best practices that we have learned from other communities. And when it comes to a health crisis, I would agree with everybody. We've learned a great deal, but we've also documented a great deal during this, the course of this pandemic. And I think we're in a much better position. And for those of us that are a little bit older, we can see the improvements. I know there's been a strain on the communications, but if you've been, anybody been at the convention center, the ease of people moving through for vaccines right now is just amazing. You can get in and out of the vaccine in 20 minutes. And so kudos to Jeff Coor and his team. Can we continue to improve? Did it put a strain on our communication systems? Absolutely. But we've learned a lot through this. And again, I would say, God forbid this ever happens again.
That's your time. All right, our third question is going to be asked by Devon Balet. And Devon, if you want to introduce yourself and the organization you represent, that'd be great. You'll have to unmute yourself. There you go.
All right. Yeah. So my name is Devon Balet, local photographer and carpenter, and now recently manufacturer. I don't know that I'm actually representing any one group. I was asked to join this and I'm happy to be here. So my question for everybody is, what are the unique needs of working people in Grand Junction right now? And what are your vision for solutions for them?
Thank you, Devon. Abe, you're first on this one.
Yeah, I've definitely touched on this, and this has been a center point of something that is really important to me. I'm really concerned about people being pushed out of our community if we aren't managing things appropriately, and if we just see these consistently increasing home prices. I think the median home price has gone up around 20% in the last year. So housing costs, I think, is one of the biggest issues for our working people here. We really need to prioritize affordability in this town. And there have been a number of processes that have happened in the last 1 to 2 years. The comprehensive plan rewrite, the redevelopment boundary was expanded, the impact fees came under discussion, the downtown plan of development. And in all these things, I was asking, what are we doing to prioritize affordability here? And the answer was always there's other ways we can do that. There are sharper tools is the term that was often used. And the good news is that the city is working on a project actually starting right now. There's a survey out there right now on housing costs. So I'd encourage people to go and fill that out. And that's going to inform decisions that are made on how we do find these sharper tools. What are we going to do as a community to prioritize attainable housing for people, for those teachers, for those nurses, for the people who are otherwise not going to be able to own a house. I have a good friend who is an elementary school teacher, and there's no way he could have bought a house in this community, or at least in a place he wanted to live, without a federal grant program that he was able to take advantage of. So it's great we have those things, but it shouldn't take outside influence for a teacher to be able to have a high quality of life in our community. So affordability is the number one thing for me. I also think transportation is something that's important for underserved communities. If you don't have access to a car or your own transportation, public transport, as well as walkability and bikeability are very important in order for you to be able to better your life. And so I would really like to see a robust urban trails plan, as well as a little more focus on public transport for those people who need it for their livelihood.
Thank you, Abe. Randall, you're second. You're muted.
There we go. That better?
Yep.
All right. So this is an area that's very dear to me. I've only ever worked in nonprofits serving the uninsured and the low-income people of our community. And it's been a rough go for them, for sure. I think they're in a much better spot than they were, say, 10, 12 years ago, but it's still a tough time to be a working class person in our community. Let me just tell you a story about one thing we have done already that's not very well known in Grand Junction, but is well known around the nation. See, 20 years ago, I joined a team at Marillac Clinic that was building one of the nation's first behavioral health services integrated into a primary care clinic. So our plucky group created these services by staying true to a vision that people with depression, anxiety, addiction, low incomes should be able to get these services without stigma in the same building and with the same team as where they get their medical services. Under my leadership, our community won funding to expand Marillac's model to local for-profit clinics. Integrating behavioral health services in primary care had never been successfully launched in for-profit clinics before. And we all had the experience of building the plane while we were flying it. And now 20 years later, 90% of local residents get their primary care in a clinic that integrates behavioral health services. This is the highest level of adoption of any city in the nation. And I believe the same commitment to collaboration is exactly what Grand Junction needs from their city leaders as we're addressing the needs of the working people of our community. And so that's what I'm committing to do for as city councilor myself, is to always collaborate and to make sure that we have infrastructure in place for these people. I think the next step in that regard would be looking at childcare. We have a very low childcare rates in our community, and especially lower childcare access that's certified, that's been observed and made sure to be it's of quality. Second, I think education is always an area where it affects the working class people first. I think we have a great school board right now. They're doing the best they can with some meager resources, but I think we need to diversify our education options. We need to have more school of choice, and we need to have a city that's more attractive to teachers, so we can get some of the best teachers. I love my children's teachers. They've only been in public school. I just want to get more and more of that same quality of teachers.
Thank you, Randall. Rick.
Well, I think what's unique about the working people in the Grand Junction and Mesa County as a whole, and I'll give out some information, some statistics that I looked at with Nathan Perry, who puts these out. First from the university. First and foremost, still our higher education degrees, whether it be 2-year or 4-year, we lag 10 points behind the Colorado average. And if we're going to attract quality companies, and if we're going to get quality jobs for our people, citizens of this community, we have to continue to address the fact that we have a significant delta from our state in terms of those percentages. And CMU is working hard on that, but that makes that partnership even more critical. If you take that further, our per capita income is right now about $47,000. This is up from 2017, where it was $43,000, but it's still over $10,000 less than the state as a whole. And what's even more alarming is 16% of our citizens in this community live below the poverty level. If we're going to help citizens come up and come out of the poverty and get closer to state averages from a wage structure, we have to continue working very, very hard to bring in quality jobs to this community, to give our citizens as many opportunities as possible. So those two unique factors really concern me. And I'm not trying to say that we haven't made progress, but there's still a long way to go.
Thank you, Rick. Dennis.
Thank you. I'd kind of like to make a distinction between bringing in high-paying jobs from outside, which there's a lot of effort going into now, and on the other side, dealing with people who already live here who deserve to and want to make more money. And they're not because they want to just have more money, because they need it just to live. And I think we have to not only be working on high-paid jobs for people who have college educations, but we also have to think about what can we offer to other people who are already here. And it's a tough problem. There's not an easy solution. And things like the minimum wage come into the discussion, and there are pros and cons on that, because a lot of times the minimum wage is high enough, then the employers can't afford to pay the people. But I think it deserves to have a regular discussion. And I want to point out one place where my community efforts, I think, at least attempted to deal with this problem a little bit. Mesa County got $5.3 million recently for I forget the program, but it's COVID money to help us recover from the pandemic. And it was directly related to our transportation system. And I received a call from one of the women who works at in the office at the transportation department, and asked if I would help, because she couldn't understand what was going on, because meetings were being held and decisions were being made, and no one was explaining how the decisions were being made, or even a lot of times even what the decisions were being made. But I think because I have a reputation as a community of digging into things that aren't right, I got a call. And Scott is also involved in this. But it turned out that the organization making the decisions gave absolutely $0 to paying the actual people at risk for driving. They would not give them some kind of merit pay or a raise. Basically the whole $5.3 million was reclassified so that it could be used by the city, the county, and a little bit by Fruita and Palisade for anything they want. And I don't think that's right. I think we have to have an attitude when something like this happens, that we say, who's most deserving of this money coming down? And we should take care of those people first and deal with it in an honest, open manner.
Thank you, Dennis. All right, now everybody's probably wondering who the one pretty face is on this group. Carlee, thank you so much for joining us tonight. If you can unmute yourself and introduce yourself, and Carlee will be asking the fourth question.
Hi, I'm Carlee. I'm a senior at Fruita Monument High School, and many city residents are families of color, and over 30% of District 51 students are young people of color. What would the city do under your leadership to build a deeper partnership with these residents and better address their needs? And what mechanisms would you propose for Black community member and Spanish-speaking community member engagement?
Thank you, Carlee. Randall, that's yours first.
All right. Thank you, Carlee. It's wonderful to see a senior here joining us today. It's great to see you stepping up. You know, I think this is a major issue for us. It's one that we're coming to more recently in a public way, but one that's always been part of us. I think we have a long history of migrant workers in our community who have worked in our fields in Palisade and Fruita and the areas in between. And I think we've done a pretty poor job of integrating them into our community. I think some of the biggest obstacles there are language services. Our city has taken a small step forward, but needs to do a much better job of having full-time interpreters and translators in city management so that every person who calls the city can get someone who can speak their language, or every document that goes out of the city would be available in English and Spanish, as those are the two major languages in our community. I think also the city council needs to do a much better job of leading on this issue. I think we need to be role modeling diversity and inclusivity. I think, you know, we have all these opportunities at city council meetings where we get to highlight people in the community, talk about success stories. I think those ones should often be about people who have succeeded in our community from different backgrounds. I think one of the biggest tragedies of our community is the fact that all 8 of our city council candidates this year are white men. And that, for me, that's a shame. I would love to see that be differently next time. And so under my 4 years, one of my main opportunities and my main goals will be to open up voice and choice for people of color and who come from different backgrounds, so they will be developing the leaders so that 4 years from now, we would have a much more diverse panel.
Thank you, Randall. Rick, you're next on that.
Well, I believe, and Carlee, thank you very much for this question. I believe we made a significant step forward this summer through the unfortunate tragedies of deaths of Black men and women across this country. And it prompted us to develop a task force on systemic racism in this community, which is being led by a friend and a fellow council member, Anna Stout. We're concluding the first phase, as you may know, of listening to input from and recommendations from this committee. And the committee is made up of folks from government, made up from folks from the public safety side of things, educators, clergy, students from District 51. There are 2 of them that the last time I was there, and the university, and people of other ethnicities and lifestyles. And we're coming out of that phase of listening. And in the very near future, recommendations are going to be coming out of this committee on systemic racism in our community. And I'm looking forward to what those recommendations are. And I'm very pleased. It's been a ground up movement through this committee because that's what we needed. We needed to truly understand the needs at a ground level rather than us push it down from city council. So I got my fingers crossed, and I know we've got a very good leader working on it.
Thank you. Thank you, Rick. Dennis, you're next on that question, please.
I watched the proceedings in our community last June when this tragedy for the whole nation came to a degree to Grand Junction. And I watched Anna Stout pretty much by herself stand up and say, we've got to do things differently. And she caught a lot of grief from other council members. And it's just amazing how much grief that she was given for even bringing the topic up. And if there was ever a question in anybody's mind about whether we have systemic segregation, I'm using the wrong word, I'm sorry, in the community, it just watched the talks that were made afterwards. There was just no sympathy given for the fact that we have many people who have had generations of being put down, and still no one is listening to them. And mostly I want to be a listener. This is a topic that I'm not an expert on, but I know there's a problem, and I want to hear what comes out of the committee Rick referred to. I want to listen to other people, and I want us to take this problem very seriously and deal with it in the near future.
Thank you, Dennis. Abe, it's yours.
Yeah, well, thank you, Carlee. It's amazing every time we see people of your age who are so involved already, because even a lot of older folks don't pay this much attention to local politics. So it's heartening to see people your age who are. So you deserve a lot of credit for that. You know, as Rick said, it really starts with listening. It has to start with listening. I mean, very few of our leaders are part of these minority communities. And when you're implementing these policies, we don't implement them for minority communities. We need to implement it with minority communities. That's the most important thing. You know, as he said, it's not coming down from on high and saying, this is what we're doing. It's getting that engagement, it's getting that involvement. It's listening first, working with them instead of working for them. So I think that's the most important thing in terms of how we approach these kinds of issues. And as Randall mentioned, one of the biggest things that City Council can do is we really set a tone in the community, you know, and depending on if and how you're listening to the community members that come before you, that sets a major tone for how the community responds to these kind of things. So, you know, again, it all comes back to listening for me. You know, I'm a white guy. Like, I can't speak for the Black community. I can't speak for, you know, the Hispanic community. What I can do is I can listen and I can hear what their pain points are, and then we can work with them to address the things that are impacting them. So it's not for me to say how we address that. It's for me to say that I'm here to listen and to work with them.
Thank you, Abe. Now we're coming to our fifth question, which is going to be asked by Rusty Lloyd of the Community Impact Council. Rusty, thanks for being with us tonight. And can you tell the audience what the Community Impact Council is?
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Well, thanks for having me. My name is Rusty Lloyd. My day-to-day operation is executive director for River's Edge West, a nonprofit that does environmental and conservation work along our rivers in our community. We're a member of the Community Impact Council. I sit on the board. The CIC, the Community Impact Council, formerly the Human Services Council, is really, the mission is to provide a collective voice and forum for advocacy and education of nonprofits in Mesa County. Our goal is really to develop connections between agencies, nonprofit, and the community at large. And we just really want to encourage partnerships with broad coalitions that foster that collaboration that really our community needs by providing services and education and connecting with the businesses and the governmental entities that support a lot of those nonprofits and interact with them. So that's really what we try to do. So My question is really centered on nonprofit work. Nonprofits exist in order to meet unmet needs that impact all aspects of the community. As an elected official, what specific steps would you take or efforts would you support to help ensure that those nonprofits can continue to meet the demand for the services that they provide that are so important to our community?
Thank you, Rusty. Rick, that's your question first.
Well, Rusty, we've done some of that this year based on COVID. As you may be aware, we have approved 2 tranches of funds. One early in May for $1 million, and here most recently another $1 million, and that has been split between the nonprofits and small business, basically $1 million each, and that's very specific to helping for basic services that the community need, most notably food and shelter. But at the same time, this most recent one was for operations. We also flow through, as you know, the CDBG funds from the federal government, and there have been three offerings from our federal government this year, and we are also in the process of flowing those through. I would expect on an ongoing basis, this is probably going to trigger an additional set of funds on an ongoing basis to help the nonprofit community, because I think from everything, and I spent a lot of time with Western Colorado Community Foundation at the beginning of this crisis, and listening again to the needs of nonprofits. And I would expect it's going to have to become a larger line item within our budget to help wherever we can, because you folks provide such critical services. We cannot afford for you not to continue to be sustainable, because we know you can do it a lot more cost effectively than government can.
Thank you, Rick. Dennis, you're up next on that.
I agree with nearly everything Rick had to say there. I think we have to recognize that people in a lot of areas need services that the private sector who can't afford to deliver, and the city and county have trouble fitting it into their overall realm. And in the fact that we have people who generally make not very much money not volunteering, but working to provide services to people that are very much in need, needs to be recognized. It needs to be recognized verbally, and it needs to be recognized financially. Rick referred to this last little go around about getting $300,000 more to the not-for-profits, and the process used, which once again was under the direction of the leadership, at least, of Anna Stout, came up with the use of the incubator center to collect requests for these funds, so the funds don't just get thrown out there and first come, first serve, and evaluate the proposals that are coming from the not-for-profits, and then awarding the $300,000 to the most worthy not-for-profits. Not-for-profits is a very important part of our community, and I think we have to, as in many other areas, make sure we're paying attention to what we're doing in that area.
Thank you, Dennis. Abe?
Yeah, Rick addressed a lot of it. We're so fortunate in this community for the number of people and the number of organizations we have that work on all issues, all different types of topics. In my service on the board of an organization called FOIAD, a nonprofit that, again, we work to provide opportunities for underserved youth to get outdoors, for mental health, for personal growth. I am constantly amazed and can't believe the number of different organizations, the amount of money that's available in the community to put towards these kind of things, the amount of connections we're so fortunate to have those organizations here. And as Rick said, there's a lot of things they can do that are just, it's much more cost effective to have them doing it. And frankly, they're the ones who have been doing it and are the experts on those subjects. So when something like the pandemic comes up and we want to do, relief, we put it to them and we count on them to do it. So what the city can do is continue to, have that synergistic relationship where we count on them for certain things and we acknowledge their contributions to the community and their better ability to do some things than the city can do. We just need to maintain that collaborative approach. It's a huge asset to our community.
Randall, it's yours.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to channel my wife for this comment here. My wife is an immigrant to the United States. She comes from Brazil, a woman of color, and her life has been amazingly blessed by nonprofits. I think the two biggest nonprofits in our community are CMU and Hilltop, and she is a CMU graduate, studied accounting here in her second language, and then went off and has worked with Hilltop for the last 10 years. Hilltop is, I think, a model nonprofit for any community. They have diverse offerings for older adults, for people with traumatic brain injuries, for people in domestic violence situations, and for people who are looking for work and for food security. I think Hilltop is like many great nonprofits in our community. We have this wonderful foundation that buoys up people and supports them in their hour of need. And I think right now is an hour of need for nonprofits in our community. They are strapped, they are stretched too thin. They've been carrying a huge weight over the last year with the pandemic. And I think we need to have a much more thoughtful plan as to what is the relationship between nonprofits and the city. I don't think the city needs to give more money to nonprofits, but they need to have a strategic plan of how they will interface with them and how will they make sure that they're collaborating so that each nonprofit has a role in the community, a population in the community, and a specific relationship for helping back and forth between that nonprofit and the community.
Thank you, Randall. Now I'm going to shift the focus a little bit. Our sixth question, Grand Junction, and it's pretty obvious what's going on around here. Grand Junction is attracting a fast-growing migrant population of retirees and seniors who bring investment capital, discretionary incomes, and in many cases, professional talents and expertise to share with the community. What can our city do to improve quality amenities for the seniors and to enlist their energies and talents into the community? And Dennis, that one's up to you.
Being in that age category, I can speak with authority, I guess, because my friends and people I know are around my age, and we get together in a lot of different ways. One of the things I do in the community is play pickleball, and it attracts a lot of seniors, and it's just a great thing for people who can no longer run marathons and ride mountain bikes over the top of every mountain in the state. I think it's amazing how positive the attitude is of most of the seniors, and I think the seniors are not looking for a lot of financial assistance in a lot of cases. I think they want to be respected. They want to be heard. I think one of the good, neat things in the community is Gene Goffin writes a page, I don't know if it's every week or every other week or something, but he's 80 some years old and he's an attorney from, I think, New York, somewhere back east. But he writes about how it is for him and others that he knows to deal with the medical situation and other problems that affect people in my age group. I think we need to recognize that we have a wonderful medical delivery system here. We're really lucky to have people like Randall and others who are here to help seniors so that we can live in a great community and still have top category medical care. We are a lot like other members of the community. We want to make sure we can get around in the community when we want to go. We don't want logjam traffic. We want consideration when new roads are built for bike lanes and pedestrian lanes, that kind of thing. But for a lot, I think the senior community is not asking for a lot. They're just good people, and they enjoy living here.
Thanks, Dennis. Abe, what can we do for seniors?
Yeah, I think we start by recognizing their contribution. You know, seniors are a pretty often forgotten group in this country as a whole. And I think we need to start by recognizing that they're still, you know, vibrant contributing members of the community, which is something that a lot of people don't give them credit for. And going back again to my answer to, you know, working with minority communities, same thing when we're working with the senior community is listen to them and see what it is they need. You know, my initial ideas would be, I think some of the biggest issues faced are troubles with, you know, getting things done for those who are getting on in years and need help around the house or help with transportation. So programs for that can be helpful. And we do have some great nonprofits working on that. You know, also isolation can be a serious thing for a lot of seniors. So anything we can do to increase that, you know, sense of community and the opportunities for building that community is important. And also just having programs for those in their retirement, you know, for mental stimulation, the free college courses we have, arts programs, you know, again, community events, just things that help to keep them involved, keep them in the community. And again, fundamentally just recognize that there's still people who are contributing to our community who have important wisdom, important things to say, and people we should be listening to because they've seen a lot of things and they have a lot of wisdom to give us as we make decisions about the future. So, you know, fundamentally, I think just including them is the most important thing we can start with. And then from there, we can have the conversation about what their acute needs are in order to feel more fulfilled in the community.
Thank you. Randall?
Yeah, let me just give a hat tip to Dennis Simpson. Just thinking about your opening comment about how you, over a couple of years, retired, cut back on hours and eventually retired. And then you've continued contributing to our community in a very open and important way across in retirement. You know, you haven't given up your life goals of financial accountability and transparency. You've actually refined your mission and refined your vision in retirement. And that idea of a continuum, I think, is essential for seniors. There's several different continua that need to be taken care of. One is a continuum of services that will engage them in things they enjoy doing. As Abe mentioned, loneliness and isolation are two of the biggest concerns when you ask older people about how their life is, especially in the middle of a pandemic where they were the people we were most trying to protect because they were at most risk. And so having a continuum of services, so it would be, you know, services in their homes, services in the community, services for housing, services for transportation, services for food. And so this whole continuum of where at first, when you're recently retired, you're just as independent as you were before, but as you get older, you're going to need to have more benefits. In our community, we have a great continuum of housing. We have most people live into their own houses into their 70s and 80s these days. And so we have a continuum that starts with, let's give some in-home housing support for cleaning, for nursing, just like a half day a week, just to help them stay in their house and maintain independence. And then we have assisted living, and then we have nursing homes. And then we have, for people who are struggling the most, we have Alzheimer's units and other adult day centers where they can still live very vibrant lives, supported lives, that we're meeting them where they are and allowing them to have as much joy and connection as they did when they were younger.
Thank you, Randall. Rick?
One thing I can say about the seniors population is it's a group of people that are not bashful. They are more than willing at all times to engage and to give you insight as to what they're looking for. And we've overused this word today, but if we just listen, that helps a great deal. Also, one of the things that we've done here very recently, I think everybody's familiar with, is we did a survey associated with the new Parks and Recreation and Outdoor Space plan, and seniors participated at a very good level there. So we have a much better view of what they're looking for in the future in terms of future amenities. And it isn't going to surprise anybody that right at the top of the list is a community rec center. That came up through the seniors. In the COVID crisis, you know, we talk about it from a negative standpoint, but some real positives have emerged out of this in private enterprise that I think will help seniors. I don't think we're going to go back to retail as it was 10 or 15 years ago. I think the delivery services, both from a food standpoint as well as a product standpoint as a whole, I think it's here to stay. And I think seniors in particular are really going to benefit from that. And then the other obligation, I think, is to always make it very easy for seniors to see volunteer opportunities. And the one that comes to mind again that seniors are doing a magnificent job is at the convention center right now for the vaccine. There was a call to action, and that is staffed exceptionally well with seniors that are doing a remarkable job. So again, I would summarize by saying, we just have to listen, and then we have to act upon it, upon their priorities, because they're not bashful to tell you what they want.
Thank you, Rick. I wanted to throw one question out from the audience, and Rick led into that very well. And that is, why don't we have a rec center here? And would you support it and work for it? And let's start out with Abe on that.
I think it's past due. For a community of our size to not have a rec center is pretty unusual. But funding it has been the real question. You know, it fills a couple of things that we need in this community. Seniors are definitely one, but I think also for our young people, and particularly for the underserved youth who don't have familial support. And, you know, it like from a public safety standpoint, from an education standpoint, from every standpoint, if we don't have positive things for our youth to do in this community, then the only thing they have left to do is negative things, you know, and none of us want that. So I would really like to see a rec center, you know, especially for those underserved youth. And I think it needs to be accessible to them. I think we need to have programming that's geared towards them and also towards that senior population. And I think, you know, I hope that it's something that's a little more feasible, you know, in the coming year, because we do have the marijuana question on the ballot. And, you know, the fact is, whether we want it or not, we have marijuana in our community. You know, it's a 15-minute drive to Palisade. It's not like people can't get it if they want it. So what we're doing now is we're, you know, the cities around us are getting the tax revenue, and we're just sitting here dealing with the impact. So one of the positives there is they're talking about using that tax revenue, which I don't think it's the end all be all solution. It's a small piece of the pie, but they're talking about using that tax revenue to fund the community center. And that could hopefully bring it down from a 0.25% tax to a 0.1% tax, which is a significant decrease and maybe more feasible for the people in our community that are struggling, because, you know, taxes do matter and nobody wants to raise taxes. We want it to be, you know, fair and equitable, but, you know, these amenities are also important for those community members almost more than anybody else. So I do think a rec center would be fantastic for the community, for our public safety, for our young people, and for our seniors. And it's something I would like to see happen here.
Thank you, Abe. Randall?
Yeah, so about 2 weeks ago, I had the opportunity to take a tour of Lincoln Park and Stoker Stadium with Ken Sherbino, the head of Parks and Recreation for City Council. And we're up in the top of the kind of the box at the stadium, looking down over Lincoln Park. And he was just talking, kind of showing me the vision for the rec center. And when I was up there looking down, it took me back to when I was a child. And I grew up in Salt Lake City, and every city had its own rec center. And I would go there at least once a week for swimming. We had our soccer, we had basketball there, and it was full of families with young children and older adults. The older adults, my sister-in-law teaches aqua aerobics at a place in Provo, Utah. And they get into the water, they're having community, and they're spending time together and strengthening their bodies and their hearts. And I think that's what we need. I think that's the thing that's lacking in our community is that rec center. You know, some people are concerned about, is this going to be competing with your gyms? I don't think that's the concern. I don't think gyms want to have children running around playing basketball, splashing around their pools. Those are for people who want to lift weights, who want to do lap swimming. I want a recreation center that serves children and older adults with their unique needs. And so I'm a very strong advocate for a rec center.
Thank you. Rick, you're next on that. You get it, Rick? Hey, Dennis, why don't you go next and we'll get, oh, Rick, are you okay now?
It just finally went. I too am in favor of community rec center, and I will support it any way I can. But I think we're coming into a time where it really has to be a citizen decision because of the funding. And if the community feels as strongly as it does by way of surveys, at some point we're going to have to face the fact that we're going to have to borrow money. There might be some additional revenue streams that can bring those the bond payments down, but to borrow money, as we all know, under Tabor, we have to go back to the citizens and ask them the question: are they willing to help pay for this? And I just don't know any other way around it. I'm hoping we can bring that piece of that puzzle down as much as we can, but there's no guarantees. So I think we're going to have to work very, very hard to convince all the citizens of this community that borrowing on this is worth their time and energy.
Thank you, Rick. Dennis?
I think I'm on the same page most are here, that I really would like us to have a community center. When my kids were young, we were living in Durango. I and several other people worked to convince the local governments there to build a rec center. And we fought for several years. And like a lot of my efforts, I lost. Then we moved out of town, and then they built the rec center. So that's my history on rec centers. The problem I see is the marijuana tax is not a solution to pay for this. And I think rather than get too far down the road on all the nice things we would like to have in there, and don't get me wrong, I think we'd need a rec center, but we need to look realistically at what our revenue sources are. The last time this came up, it was a proposal for a sales tax, and everybody was having a sales tax increase for worthy programs. And we now end up with a sales tax rate that's over 8. And I don't know that it's healthy for the community to raise that sales tax again. The sales tax is a regressive tax, creates most hardship on the poor people who have to buy basic necessities. And then we tax them 8 or 9 or 10%. And that just makes their life that much harder to deal with. And I don't, I'm kind of a numbers guy. I don't see what the other source of revenue might be. I mean, I think that the proponents of this need to talk early on as much about the amenities that they would like to see us have as to the realistic view of how can we pay for it. And my mind will be open. Obviously this is going to be something on the table after the election, but one thing I pride myself in is I listen to the other side. I keep my mind open and I say, well, yeah, you might be right about that. And let's pursue that. But right now I just see this big hurdle of we can't do sales tax, and then what does that leave us
with? Thank you, Dennis. All right, everybody. I want to thank everybody for joining us tonight. We're going to have closing arguments in a minute. But first of all, I want to thank everybody that tuned in tonight and remind everyone that will be a recording of this on Western Colorado Alliance Mesa County's website. We'll post that up so people can check in. I think this gave an excellent background on the candidates to the audience tonight, and we certainly hope that the candidates that didn't show up tonight can find it in their gumption to join us next time on March 10th. Certainly I want to thank too Carlee and Rusty and Devon for joining us and asking questions. Really appreciate a lot. Next week on the 10th, we'll have some more organizations asking questions relevant to the infrastructure and the economic part of Grand Junction that we all want to hear about. So with that, I will hand it over to Abe for your final comments, and thank you everybody for joining us.
Thanks, Scott. Thank you to the organizers for having us here tonight, and thanks for all the great questions. I first want to take a moment to recognize all the people in the audience who have taken the time to watch and listen to this. You deserve a lot of credit for making the effort to be informed on us candidates and also on the issues that we're going to be voting on in April. Local elections are really important, and there's really almost nothing else we get to vote on that more directly impacts our lives on a day-to-day basis. So I'm sure you all will be exercising your right to vote, and I just want to encourage you to talk to your friends and neighbors, let them know why you believe local elections are so important, and encourage them to vote as well. I wish you all had had a chance to hear from all 8 of the city council candidates tonight, including my opponent. Personally, I plan to attend every public event that I'm invited to. I think it's crucially important in a representative democracy like ours that our elected leaders work for everyone in our community and not just the people that they already agree with. When I'm on city council, I'm going to be a servant for our entire community, and I'll listen to and respect the many voices we have so that we can protect the things we value about our lives here and also work together to better the things that we need to work on. So you can reach out to me anytime at abe4gj.com. That's abe4gj.com. My email and my phone number are both on there, so please do reach out with any questions or ideas you have. And I would certainly appreciate your support for this campaign to make sure that we have capable and representative leadership for our city. Let me know if you'd like me to drop by a yard sign, if you have a group of people in the community that I should meet. I love making those connections, and I want to serve every resident of Grand Junction. So thank you so much for being here, and I hope to earn your vote for District E in April's election.
Thank you, Abe, for being here tonight. And now we'll go to Randall.
Yes, thank you, Western Colorado Alliance and all the organizations that make up your organization. This was a very well done forum. Great questions, lively discussion among the people. I will echo Abe's wish that we had all 8 candidates here today. I think if we don't all show up and bring our disparate voices to these issues, we're only going to get one side of the issue, and that's going to be to everyone's detriment. I did want to invite everybody out on March 6th at 1 p.m. in Riverside Park. We're going to host an event. It's going to be a cultural integration event. It's going to be entirely in Spanish. We're going to have leaders from many different Hispanic and Spanish speaking organizations sharing their ideas, making advocacy for them. And we would love to have as big a crowd as possible at that. My website is randallforgj.com. There you'll find my phone number and my email address. I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to bring you a yard sign. And of course, I'd love to have your vote on April 6th.
Thank you, Randall. And Rick, thanks for being here tonight and your final remarks.
Well, I'd like to also thank both you folks as organizers and the folks that have taken their valuable time this evening to listen in. To summarize a little bit, I very much love this city, and I've given a great deal of effort to make it a better place to live. In addition to being on council and having been mayor, I have actively volunteered on boards in this community for a very long time. The St. Mary's Hospital, the Grand Junction Economic Partnership, the Grand Junction Regional Airport, the Grand Junction Housing Authority, the Riverside Commission, and with Herb Bacon was one of the founding board members of the Suicide Prevention Coalition. I also try to give back, as I said in my opening remarks, to this community by teaching at Colorado University within the Davis School of Business, and make as much time available as I can to students on an ongoing basis. As a member of council and going forward, I study the issues with a great deal of intensity to really understand what the needs of this community and the citizens are, and try to work with my fellow council members to come to actions that can benefit the community as a whole. And I try to do that always in a soft-spoken and gentlemanly manner. But in my humble estimation, my job is not done. I've got a great deal more I want to give to this community. There's a great deal more that needs to be done. So I would hope, again, to gain your support. My website is similar to Randall and similar to Abe. All you have to do is do rick4gj.com. So if you, or all three of us, if you do Rick and if you do Abe and if you do Randall, you get to all of us. And I too would really appreciate your vote, and thank you again.
Thank you, Rick. And Dennis, thanks so much for being with us tonight and your final comments.
Thank you. I, like everybody else, would like to thank the Western Colorado Alliance for putting this together. It's been a fun experience and I've learned a lot. I guess I find when I go to these kinds of things, I learn every time from what Rick may say or what Randall may say or what Abe may say. Everybody has good ideas and we all have the need to learn from each other. And if we're going to do that, we all have to have open minds and we have to be willing to disagree from time to time. And I think with these gentlemen, if I'm elected, I can disagree with them, they can disagree with me, and we'll not end up making enemies out of each other. That's too often what may happens in our local government. We have to keep the discussion on the issues, not on the personalities. I think I see the whole list of people who are here, and I think a lot of them think of me as being much more right-wing than I'm trying to convey to you. I'm definitely a Republican. I'm definitely interested in making sense financially. I'm also interested very much in making sure the decision-making process, whether the issue turns out the way I want it or not, is fair and open, and that the city becomes a much better listening organization to the community than it has. I also want to comment on the comprehensive plan that this session was based around. I hadn't read it until about 3 weeks ago, and I still haven't read it all. It's a complex document, but it has a lot of good information in it, and I'm learning from it as we go. And one of the people who's helped me understand this is Chuck McDaniel. And you may remember Chuck beat me in the last election, but we've become friends, close friends since then, because I learned from him during our campaign and since a lot of things. And I think I've imparted knowledge with him that he is finding useful as he serves on the council. I guess it's important to me to also emphasize that it's just 4 of us here. Our opponents have a focus that's probably a lot different than the people who are attending here. Let me put it that way. And while they have good ideas, their ideas to me seem somewhat limited, and that there are many issues in the community that I don't think they're focusing on. And I have a web page too, Simpson for GJ, maybe it's Simpson for Grand Junction, I can't quite remember, but you can find it. And I'd like to have donations, and I'd like to have your comments of things that you think we ought to be thinking about in this campaign. Once again, I thank everybody, and good night.
All right, everybody. And as Walter Cronkite said, and that's the way it is. Good night.